Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Podcasting's the disease, and Houselights is the cure. Specifically, welcome to House of Cosmatos, where we're examining the works of George P. Cosmatos here on Houselights, as we come up on the second one of our series looking at his works, 1986's Cobra, the exploits of Marion Cobretti, an LA detective hot on the heels of a psychopathic killer and his gang of axe-wielding maniacs that are helping him sow discord throughout the city. Lots of sunset shots, lots of Brigitte Nielsen. What else does this movie have in store? I'm joined by my loyal sidekick and person who I love to joke around with at midnight talking about crimes, Sergeant Darren Moser. And we're joined by our by-the-book, stick-in-the-mud detective Tristan Riddell, who's constantly reminding us that even cops have to follow rules and read people their rights and all of those lame things that get in the way of curing the problems of crime. So, gentlemen, we're here. We're here at Cobra, a 1986 little film.
I'm just trying to let you know that murder is wrong. I mean, am I the bad guy for saying that?
You know what? It depends on whether it was a bad person, Tristan, that's in the law somewhere, I think. Isn't it somewhere in the law that unless it's a bad guy, then it's bad? But if it's a bad guy, then it's good.
I heard him literally tell him, just do what you do, which sounds like sanctioning death to me. But hey, you know, it's not like the majority of the body counts of this movie were caused by Sylvester Stallone. But hey, they were all... But I was talking to Tristan a moment about this. This movie in particular feels like it fuels the plot of Last Action Hero so much. Like, you know, there's elements of that character. Obviously, it's a lot more violent, but just the whole, like, it like sums it up. The whole like, oh, but they were all bad, you know, and it's just like, that's exactly what that character does.
I admire your restraint for not saying it in his accent.
Yes, that is good. No, you know, that is, I hadn't thought about it as a template for Last Action Hero, but I would definitely say that this film is source material for Last Action Hero. Last Action Hero is a send-up of action movies. And
it is.
Is there any, of all of the movies we've watched throughout the course of Houselights, is there any other movie that is so, predictably, incorrigibly locked in to just paint by the numbers, gotta do what we gotta do? Like, there's absolutely no stretch to innovate here or do something fresh or different. I mean, am I way off base here? Because Cobra, and I'll go ahead and say it, part of the charm of this is this really feels like the people making the movie just said, this is what people like. Just it's almost like ChatGPT script before ChatGPT was a thing. Am I off base there?
No, it feels like if it wasn't for the elaborate set pieces, I would have thought that this was a wholly improvised movie. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds jokey, but I'm kind of serious, where everything about it is just like, okay, now I want you to just kind of, shoot the breeze with your partner. What do you want me to talk about? It doesn't matter. It doesn't make a thing up, like, and so there's just, you're like, oh, I love junk food. And it's just like, okay. And there's these bad guys and they got axes, and we don't know why they have
highly
axes,
impractical weapon. Just gonna put it out there. Like,
they don't have guns, but they have axes. What's their motivation? It doesn't matter. Get the hell out of here if you're asking about motivation. And it's just,
what's that
it's
mean?
just like, and then they go here and they do this and they here there,
Yeah,
what's their motivation? He gets tossed out. It's like,
right. Yeah, throw out the window.
I'm not going to listen to you.
I find it interesting that you say that it feels improvised. Darren, do you think that it's strictly the sophomoric dialogue that makes it feel improvised? Or do you think that this movie carries an air of disassembly, of just something slapped together? Or Tristan, am I reading you wrong? You feel like this is something that was slapped together, not a lot of thought behind it. Darren, do you get the same vibe?
Well, first, I want to confirm: is that what you're saying, though, Tristan? That it does?
Yeah, I mean,
feel slapped
it wasn't
together?
initially. I think it's kind of implied with what I was saying. It's just like it feels slapped together. I mean, it feels like
I
the
just didn't want to
script.
rebut you and then be like, "But
Yeah,
that's not actually not what I meant."
no, it's just like the script doesn't even feel secondary. It honestly feels like, okay, we just need to get to this scene. So say whatever you
Set
need to
piece to set
say.
piece, action
Yeah,
to action.
exactly. That's all it is. That's all
I,
it is.
yes, I will say yes and no. I'll say it is obviously set piece to set piece, but the set pieces are actually well constructed. The chase in the hospital, the end fight in the refinery, the end speech. All these moments are good. Like even there is a moment in the car chase where they're going down the alley at like 5 miles an hour. And it's really obvious that they're not. All of a sudden, they're going much slower than they were. But that aside, I guess, is it wrong to have a formula of set piece to set piece if that's the kind of movie you're trying to make? You're not wrong if that's what you're going for.
But even if that's just what you're going for, it doesn't make it good.
No,
You know,
that's true.
I think that's the main thing. And I'm not trying to come down on you for that comment. It's just there's so many times when I kind of hear that, where again, I'm not coming down on you, but where so many people say like, "Oh, well, that's what the filmmaker intended." And I'm like, "Well, I don't care if that's what the filmmaker intended to do. It was a bad decision."
Oh, we've seen that a lot where they'll be like, "Oh, I wanted you to feel like it was night, and so I didn't light anything except for candlelight." It's like, well, I couldn't see your movie, so message received.
On this thread, I think that Cobra, first and foremost, it's very much worth mentioning that this is one of the infamous Cannon Film Group films of the 80s. And Cannon Film Group was basically a shell game where they would announce, tell me if this sounds like current filmmaking, kids. They would announce a large slate of movies. A lot of them wouldn't get made, and then a ton of them would take a loss, and then every so often a movie like Cobra would be a hit, and then they would just use tax shelter laws to move the money around from place to place. It doesn't sound anything like every other franchise that exists.
Are you describing Marvel? Because it sounds like you're describing Disney and Marvel.
I would allegedly say that could be an argument that's made, but Cannon films were not known for being quality films. They released such a large library of slapdash knockoff movies that it became its own industry in the 80s until basically it collapsed under its own weight. But I say all that to lead into this point where, Tristan, I get what you were saying with that, but 1986 is an interesting year. We're about to tip over into the action genre sort of reinventing itself with movies like Predator and Die Hard and Top Gun, and there's a different vibe on the horizon. Do you think that Cobra is basically you can look at it as a film on the tipping point of when the genre has run out of steam? It's basically the ideas are running out of this type of action movie, specifically the cop thriller movie, and we're about to launch into a totally different type of action film.
I think that's incredibly astute, because when Top Gun came out, the producers in Cannon were just like, this is not going to work. Like they were looking at Cobra and they're like, holy crap, like if that's what people are expecting this year, Cobra is not going to deliver. And that's one of the reasons why why it's only 87 minutes. They cut 30 to 40 minutes from it, not only to not make it X-rated because of the violence, but to trim it down so they could pump in as many showings in the theater as possible so they could try to recoup their costs. So they knew that they had a stinker, and they knew that it was going to get blown out of the water by everything else that was coming out that year. And so that's why we got the mess that we did. Now, I really wish we could have seen some sort of director's cut, because this movie feels like it's missing 40 minutes because so much of it doesn't make sense.
It's
like
really
I
short.
watched it, and I watched it intently, and I had to go online and search like, what was the bad guy's motivation for doing what they were doing?
He was evil, obviously, and had a knife.
A very cool looking knife, but which hey, that's a thread right there. Rambo had a cool looking knife. The killer here has a cool looking knife. Maybe we'll see a cool looking knife in the next films that we're going to be looking at, directed by Cosmatos. But in terms of that extended version of the movie, nobody has ever seen it. There was supposedly a cut floating out there for years that disappeared before digitizing was a thing. Supposedly. Nobody's ever seen it. But somebody did ask Stallone on, I think, Instagram at one point about the missing footage and could they theoretically release an alternate cut of Cobra. And it wasn't a long answer, but his response was basically, yeah, it exists. So I have to ask, Darren, would you want to see 30 more minutes of Cobra in action? Do you think that would actually help this film?
I do, especially since it sounds like they've stated when they did that extreme cut down that basically anything that wasn't Stallone was removed. So any sort of motivation that was shot, it might not exist, but the most we get of the bad guys are them clanking together, their axes. And it's just, but as Cobra says, like, they're actually really organized and they're not dumb. Like, they're like, oh, look, someone saw us, get their license plate and use our informant to find who they are so we can kill them. Like, that's like 3 steps ahead of most biker gangs. This isn't a bike gang just rolling through town. So yes, I would have liked a longer version because I would pray that would give us more nuance and motivation. I don't necessarily want 40 more minutes of just more axes and death and blood. Like, that might be all that exists, but I would hope that you would get at least something more from all the great supporting cast, because there's a decent cast here.
There is a decent cast. And we were talking about it before we started recording, but I'm going to go instead of with the praise angle first. I feel like, I'm just going to say here, the three of us, we tend to like to get the negativity out of our system and then pivot and start talking about the positivity. And we know there are positive notes about the cast that are coming. But instead, I will open with this question about casting. Tristan, did you get any sense of chemistry between Sylvester Stallone and Brigitte Nielsen in this movie?
No, so to the nth degree, because by the time that they insinuate that they sleep together, I'm like, why?
Yeah, right. Yes.
Like, I honestly was confused. I was like, is it just because it's a man and a woman in a movie? Is that why they're sleeping together? And it's the 80s? I think that's genuinely the only reason why they have them sleep together. Like, I was surprised at their restraint for not showing a graphic sex scene, because that would have been the MO in the 80s, especially with Stallone. But yeah, I think there was one scene where she put ketchup on fries, and that was the most that they spoke to each other. I still couldn't tell you what the conversation was about.
I mean, there was more chemistry between Ann Lewis and Murphy in RoboCop, and they purposely made sure there was no chemistry besides just being partners in that movie.
Excellent point. I'd say that's an apt description. But in terms of that chemistry missing from there, that means that we're looking for chemistry in other relationships that are there. And the first fallback one is Cabretti with his sidekick, Sergeant Gonzalez. Darren, did you see any chemistry between Stallone and Santoni while they were supposedly best friend partners for the last however many years before this movie happened?
I mean, did they ever ride in the same car? I guess they did for a moment. Again, I feel like that landed on the chopping floor in those 30 to 40 minutes. I'm sure there was more of that. And it's like you said in the beginning, John, it's like they spitballed the food health thing, and then that's all they talked about. And it kind of got old. Like, and the gummy bears line fell flat on its face. It didn't give a laugh. It didn't give a connection. I mean, if he had said something like a cheeseburger or something like that, I don't know, easy to make that line better.
So I'm going to say we've got two core relationships in this film, and we all agree we don't have any real chemistry. So that actually goes in before we even talk about the rest of the cast. all of the problems we've isolated just here in the opening quarter of the show. Can anybody explain for me why this was a box office hit? $25 million spent making this movie. 160 million is the listed box office, probably worldwide. I don't know what it made statewide.
Probably worldwide.
Yeah. So, but that's still, even if you said, oh, well, it only made 70 million in the States or something like that. That's still a hit. So what were people responding to? Or Tristan, is this simply all of the showings of Top Gun were sold out? And so people had to go watch Cobra because they'd already gotten a sitter and they were just going to go to the movies anyway.
I think it's Stallone's name. He puts butts in seats, especially in the 80s. I don't think this is word of mouth where people are like, oh my God, you got to see Cobra. I think they played their hand. They knew exactly what to do. They're like, we have a crap movie, but we have Stallone's name. Let's put Stallone's name above the title.
It's literally the same size on the poster. It says
it's
Stallone
the same
Cobra
size on the poster.
Yeah,
that is.
And we get going as possible. Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's like it's only 87 minutes. People are like, dude, I could take a long lunch and watch this movie. And why wouldn't I want to see a Stallone film?
So that's a great point. Naturally, Darren, do you think that the reputation, because people would have heard that this movie got kicked back from the ratings board left and right for how violent and how gross and how over the top it was. Slasher films are big. Over the top action films have always been big. Do you think that the troubles with the ratings board help explain some of this box office as well?
Could be. I mean, you tell teenage boys they barely scraped it by into an X-rated or into an R-rated movie. It's going to put butts in seats. But like Tristan said, I think Stallone's name was the biggest draw. And again, 1986, how much is a movie ticket? A couple bucks. Like the barrier to choose to watch this is beyond low. And if you want to just go watch Stallone kick butt, that's what this movie is going to give you. It's a May 86 release. It's summer. It's heading into summer. I think while it's not a great film, it has all of the pieces to at least get the butts in the seats, and thus it made money.
So that's fair enough. But and 87 minutes isn't asking a lot of time of people. They won't walk out usually before 90 minutes. They'll stick it out. But Tristan, do you see, because we've alluded to strong members of the cast, did you see performances here that explain why it garners a little bit of a cult following? Why was there anybody's performance here in a supporting role that would explain to you, maybe it gave something for somebody to hang on to say like, yeah, but you know what? Andrew Robinson was really good in this movie, or, oh, sure, you might have problems with it, but you really got to go see David Rashi's very small role as the photographer who's coming on to Brigitte Nielsen and then gets murdered.
It definitely wasn't the performances at all. I mean, these were cardboard cutouts. These were absolutely wooden characterizations. I think the only thing that garners it a quote unquote cult following is because it's so tragic. And by tragic, I mean just awful. And also because it's so quintessential in its stereotypes and its archetypes. Like this is why parody films are made. Like this is almost a parody of itself. It's kind of like when Walk the Line came out. Even though I'm a big fan of Walk the Line, that movie was ripe for parody, and I would have been absolutely shocked if Walk Hard didn't come out because of that. And with Cobra, I was when this movie started, I had never seen this movie before, and I watched the first time I watched it was in preparation for this podcast, and when the movie started, I was grinning ear to ear. I was like, oh my God, this movie is going to be awesome. This is going to be hilarious. It's good. Like he's stepping out, and like we're seeing the motorcycle and the red sun, and he's got a cobra on the butt of his gun because his name is Cobretti. God, and he has the matchstick in his mouth. He's just no nonsense, and he's got this low target. People get murdered every 24 minutes. Like it's gonna. I'm like, oh my God, like this is gonna be so great. But the charm wears off real fast because you're just watching a schlock fest. And I think that's one of the things that makes it a cult movie is most of them are terrible. It's like no one watches The Room because it's Citizen Kane. They watch The Room because it's fun to make fun of. And this is definitely burgeoning in that territory.
But
No,
do you agree, Darren? This movie lacks the charm of The Room. Like there's no.
I don't want to answer that question. No, I think no. You're totally right, Tristan. I'm picturing this now with like a riff tracks and being hilarious. Or if this came out in the time of the spoof, like the scary movies, like it's a degree away from being that already. Like you said, like you add a quirky side character that normally would not be in or something like that. Like we said, it leads right into Last Action Hero in a way. It's so templative. And because it is so, it's 86 Stallone action and it's exactly what you expect. Not done well. Like, again, it doesn't have the charisma of a Rambo or, the sympathy for the character. It's like they kind of said, we don't really need all that. You just have him say something cool and roll in, and we're in the middle of the story. We go, and you can do that. It's a choice, but by not having any connection to the lead character or the villain, it harms it overall, from being another star up on our ratings, as I'm sure.
So this is the second film we've looked at from Cosmatos, and it's the second film we've seen him working with Stallone, where Stallone's star power and Stallone's producer mindset, all of that type of stuff. He's obviously the one calling the shots. Tristan, do you see any evidence here of a star and director who love working together? Or do you see a star and a director who knows to call him Mr. Stallone when he's on set?
Well, it was interesting because I knew nothing about the background of this movie. And then after I watched it, I did some research and I find out that we probably shouldn't have included this in the House of Cosmatos. Like we probably need to do, like we should have put this in the House of Stallone.
There's an asterisk.
Yeah.
There is an asterisk. Yeah.
Because like the cinematographer has gone on record saying like, yeah, no, Cosmatos didn't direct this movie. Stallone directed this movie. He was just an on-set director. He was basically the AD. Like he was a second unit director, essentially. And Stallone was calling the shots. And so I can't really comment too terribly much because it's so hard to compare this to Rambo, First Blood Part 2. Because it's hard to say,
but that spurs on its own other thing. Darren, in a case like this, it's always a question: why wouldn't Stallone have just done it himself? He had the star power, he had the pull. He would have pulled two. He would have been able to get Cannon to pay him twice, basically, because they would just drive dump trucks full of money up to start. Like the whole reason that movie stars make absolutely absurd sums of money is that was basically Cannon's whole bag. So he could have gotten so much money by doing a dual role. Why do you think Stallone didn't just direct it then?
I think it's not actually surprising that it went down this way in my mind, because if you think about it, you just came off of First Blood Part 2 with Cosmatos, and so he knows what he's capable of. He knows, Stallone knows what Cosmatos is capable of. And I think we've seen it a lot in television and other things when actors take over the directing chair. Like it's a lot of work. And if you have, like you said, an on-set director who, not that you can't give input on shots and things like that, but to go full director where every shot, every setup, every motivation, like he kind of had his cake and he ate it too, because he could be the lead and not have to shoulder the role of directing, but had the clout and the ability to basically say whatever he wanted to say happen. And then Cosmatos would do it. Again, I'm supposing a little bit, but probably not.
No, this is going to come back in future discussions about Cosmatos. Put a little pin in that one, but Stallone definitely his ego was at the top of its game as well. And Tristan, you mentioned the cinematographer, and apparently Stallone complained to him at one point that his setups were taking too long. and he fired back at Stallone that if he stopped screwing around with Brigitte Nielsen and showing off for his bodyguards, they could do things more quickly. And apparently Stallone was shocked that anybody would speak to him in such a way, but then straightened out for a time. But coming back to performances, obviously Brian Thompson, when you get cast, you're going to be in Sylvester Stallone's next big movie. It's 1986.
Wait, Moon 44's Brian Thompson?
That's
He's
right.
in this?
Hey, keep in mind, Moon 44 is in his future, his past at this point.
True. That's
okay,
true.
So remember that. But you're a young actor. You've been cast as the villainous antagonist in a Stallone action movie. And then when you're delivering your monologue in the lead up to the final fight, you have to do it with a script supervisor standing off camera because Stallone's watching a basketball game. Tristan, I'll lay it right out here to you. Do you think Cobra is a better movie if Stallone minds his P's and Q's and actually gives a damn about the production?
It's hard to say no to that. You'd have to assume that if everybody brought their A game, that it would be a better movie. But at the same time, I mean, 30 to 40 minutes is gutted from this, and it's clear that it doesn't make sense. Like I'm having a hard time thinking of a movie that was this thin on plot and story and development and motivation. It honestly was the gonzo porn of action films.
That is one heck of a way to put it. Wow.
I don't know that reference. So what is gonzo?
Yeah, don't worry about it. We're moving on.
Okay.
We're
Don't
moving
Google
on
it either.
So please, no, not especially not on your work computer. So we know we have all of these problems. We know we have this 30 minutes missing. But Darren, we do have a 1980s soundtrack at play here.
Oh,
I just wanted to ask you, did you find the soundtrack to be a compelling 1980s soundtrack, or did you find it to be as forgettable as the rest of the film?
Working too hard trying to make a living was kind of stuck in my head the rest of the day. So I'll give it that. It's a fun soundtrack. It really is. Like, there's a few tracks towards the end, like especially the very end, like with the credits are coming. I thought it was going to go into a totally different song, and it like kind of like borrowed a lot from that, but didn't actually. I can't remember the name of what it would have been, but overall, it was a fun soundtrack. I think it really was. I mean, nothing surprised me in this movie. Meaning it sounds like an 86 movie. It looks like an 86 movie. People act like an 86 movie. Like there's nothing, you have, I mean, we've talked about Last Action Hero a lot in this last, 30 minutes. Even the villain in Last Action Hero has a, sharp axe and a receding hairline, like kind of looks like the villain in this. Like it's really similar in that regard. And all it's missing really is Cobretti getting his badge taken away. That's literally the only thing missing from the police chief. That's the trope that's not in this movie. Everything else is already there.
Okay. So there is a song that you might be familiar with, Darren, that many people are, that also appeared in a 1986 film, The Touch by Stan Bush. And that appeared in Transformers, the movie, which also came out the summer of 1986. Do you
mean
think
the Boogie Nights song?
Yes. Later popularized in Boogie Nights. It was obscurely known by nerds in Transformers, the movie. But I'll just go ahead and ask it. Do you think that Stan Bush dodged a bullet and that song in this? Let me ask you this question. Where would you hear this song
I was gonna say,
in this movie?
Two parts. One, that movie is so synonymous with Transformers, and it's so just perfect in that movie. I would never want it not in that movie. But to your totally valid question of where you would put it, it doesn't really work in the end fight.
No.
It may be the car chase.
Ooh, that feels like a stretch.
But that's so early in the movie comparison. Like, I don't know. Like, it's it's really hard. Although one other thing I will say about the stunts, which I know is not the music topic, but I feel like they asked the stunt guys and like, oh, what stunt can you do? We can fall off our bikes. Great. Every shot you're gonna fall off your bikes. Every shot of a biker getting taken out is the same skid and fall. Every single one. I'm like, okay, you got one trick. You know how to do it. But yeah, oh gosh, I can't even. It's like this movie is not worthy of the touch. It's really not. I can't even think of where you would put it in this movie.
Maybe you could put it during Brigitte Nielsen's photo shoot.
I was kind of thinking that. I was thinking that.
Or it'd be like an ending credit song, I think.
I think that's the only place I can see it, is that it's an ending credits song, send the audience out on an upbeat note now that he's murdered the main villain and punched the one,
like a freeze frame, like he punches the detective and freeze frames.
Can we talk about that photo shoot real quick though? Okay.
Please.
So the editing of this movie was bananas. It felt like somebody who just learned how to edit. And they're like, you know what? Like, if you
could do a fade cut if you push this button. Oh
yeah,
my
like if you bring up the audio and you look at the waveform, like when it peaks, like we should just do a cut there. Like when the bass hits, let's just cut on the beat.
This movie offended Tristan at a core level. I could tell.
Apparently so.
It really did, because during that scene when they're transitioning to the photo shoot, we don't know a photo shoot is coming. And so we see bad guys banging axes together. Then all of a sudden we see
robots,
poorly made robots. And what I thought was a speculum at first. Like, I'm not even trying to be cute. I'm not trying to be funny.
I just think it's funny anyway.
Like, I thought, like, what? Like, are we going to this weird futuristic Obi-Gyne? You know, like, what are we doing here? And then all of a sudden we see Brigitte Nielsen in a horrible wig, and then her real hair, and then a wig again. And I'm like, oh, okay, so she's wearing wigs for the photo shoot. And then we see her keep the horrible wig on for the rest of the film. But the thing is, like, there was no, the buildup was putting the audience in the dark. And so for the longest, like, that was kind of a theme of the movie, was putting the audience in the dark. Because during that cutting, it teased something that we didn't know what was coming, and the payoff came too little too late. And that's kind of how I felt about the villains, the relationships, the plot, if you can call it that. There's just so many times where I'm just like, wait, do the cops know what's going on? Does Brigitte Nielsen know what's going on? Does Brian Thompson know what's going on? Because the audience doesn't know what's going on.
Largely the case. What we never got around to, and I'm going to bring this up simply so that you guys can be horrified at my telling of my story. But Tristan, when was the first time you encountered Cobra? I would like to know.
I mentioned it a couple minutes ago. If you clearly weren't paying attention.
Give me a break.
It was in preparation for this podcast. I hadn't seen it before. Never saw it before.
Okay.
Knew nothing about. Not a single thing about it.
A couple months back when I was on my Stallone kick after we watched all the Rocky movies. And then this was the one where I was like, I'm good. I'm full on Rocky. I'm full on Stallone. I'm good. I'm not going to keep going.
It does seem, honestly, not just with the action genre that it starts losing steam, but I think that there is a certain point where you can start to detect that Stallone's career starts losing steam. And I would say that Cobra is a flashpoint for that. I saw this on video cassette pretty much as soon as it was released on video. And my father was in the room when we saw it. So I would have been a very tender age at the time that I saw this movie for the first time. And I will carry it around in my heart forever as a result, as one of those things that I know is bad, but I can't escape its orbit. So Tristan, as a father, how disappointed are you in my dad that he let me watch this when I was such a tender young age? Let me ask you that question. Like, we know the history. Let's look at it just from today's standards. Do you view it as excessively violent in today's standards?
Well, it's so hard to say today's standards because today's standards are all over the place. With the invention of streaming and with, like the lines being blurred between movies and television, like you have something that's like the Wolf of Wall Street. You're like, good Lord, like how is this rated R? Or it's a hard R. I'm like, oh, back in my day, hard R was X or NC-17. And, you look at PG-13, which with its weird rules of you can use one F word and you can have non-sexual nudity. You can show a dude's butt, but not a woman's butt, stuff like that. It's hard to say. It really is hard to say because there's certain times when you would see some of the early murders, and I thought those were cut interestingly, where it felt graphic from what it didn't show, but yet you saw the impact of the hit, but not the hit itself. And so that in itself, I thought was pretty gruesome in the editing. But then I find out that the only reason why they did it that way is because they shot like a horrific version of every single murder. And so probably by today's standards, probably not. And Darren, you and I were talking about this one-on-one about Brian Thompson's murder, and that's what it was. It was a murder. Where like of all the killing in the movie, you think that this would be the one where they'd really live it up, where they'd really prolong his suffering. But then you see him, he's on the meat hook in the factory that makes sparks, apparently. And
I was getting major T2 vibes. T2 vibes.
I mean, man, in the 80s and 90s, there was always these factories that had maybe one employee, if you were lucky, but they were running 24/7, doing nothing except moving.
Making sparks.
Making sparks. But he's on the meat hook, and he's going towards, like
the furnace.
The furnace that looks like it was built to kill humans.
Yes.
Yeah. You sure it's not a slaughterhouse? Because it feels like a slaughterhouse instead of a meat.
And a barbecue. You slaughter the pig and then you just push it through the thing and it barbecues the meat for you.
But then it fades away and you don't actually see it. I'm like, man, you'd think that this is where you'd get the gruesome kill. Like you'd get the quote unquote satisfying kill. And then they cut away. This movie just didn't make sense.
I mean, that's fair. It's definitely one of those things where I would very much love to see that extended version of it. If Stallone says he has a copy of it, I think it's incumbent on him to release that extended version. He would make a lot of money from very curious people who would say, okay, give me the 4K of Cobra and let me see the 30 missing minutes and go for the NC-17 unfiltered rating.
Yeah, unrated cut.
And it doesn't even have to be 4K. Honestly, like if all he has is like a crappy VHS quality, they did that with Studio 54, where the director wanted a director's cut, but the footage just didn't survive. And so all he had was a crappy VHS tape transfer of the deleted scenes, and he cut them into the film. And it was announced and prefaced by saying like, yeah, this is what you're going to see. Like this is my vision, but you're going to notice when the quality dips, and that's okay.
Michael Mann did that with Manhunter as well. Where the director's cut of that, it's from his own personal print, and you can clearly see the quality difference between the two. But Darren, this is going to seem like an odd question, but as a creator, Tristan just talked about how they staged all of these, what we can clearly presume would be very practical setups for these gruesome killings. And so you have a creative team putting these very elaborate things together, designed to convince people that somebody's getting cut or a limb is getting cut off or you're seeing this or you're seeing that. From a creative standpoint, how frustrating would it be? Put yourself in that mindset where you're on set, you've built all of these things, you filmed all of this stuff, and you see the movie in the theaters and you're like, nothing made it. I can't put this on my resume.
It totally makes me think of what was it? It wasn't a remake. It was like an homage, but the Thing movie where they made one inspired by the Thing, and it told like more of the story, and they used practical effects because they were wanting to look like the 80s The Thing, and the film producer or the studio was like, no, and CGI'd over everything, and it looked like garbage. So all of your practical effects, all of your really cool, and they're like, well, it looked like it was made in the 80s, and they're like, that was the point, and now it looks like crap 90s CGI. So all that to say, yeah, maybe there would be like we say a feeling of missing out of like, but also I don't know, maybe you would have more of a sense of, oh, that was a really fun day on set that we got to take it that far, but we know it's going to get dialed back because we know our method of shooting was shoot to the tens, and we know it's going to be dialed back because there's no way it's going to be aired in this way. And that it sounds like a lot of fun. It's like, oh yeah, do that blood splatter. And, to kind of like the question you asked Tristan earlier about, is this a movie that like needs to be seen to kind of fill a gap in the 80s of like what cinema was like? And I know that wasn't your direct question, but that's the one I'm answering. But I would say there are better made, not gory, but hard R movies in this decade that I would choose way over Cobra. I mean, my first goes to like RoboCop, which has, Murphy's death scene is very graphic. Tristan doesn't like it at all, but I would, or even, well, that's more 90s. I was gonna say Starship Troopers, but so there's a lot of well told stories that are graphic. To come full circle, I think, like you're saying, this being kind of the flashpoint of Stallone's career, I think it feels like that. It feels like Stallone's career is a train that's going so fast and putting butts in seats that by the time you get to this movie, its momentum is enough to put this movie on the screen and make enough money to make it a success. And then you get to the other side of it and you're like, oh yeah, we kind of hit something as we were going down the trail, but so we're a little slower now, but we're still going. Like, yeah, that's what it feels like.
I think this would be a fun movie to do as a double feature with another arguably terrible Stallone movie that he starred in with Kurt Russell called Tango and Cash, also a cop movie with some clumsy attempts at humor.
My dad loved Tango and Cash. He absolutely loved it. And I was never allowed to watch it. That was one of the films I was never allowed to watch. And then I watched it like just a couple years ago. And I think I was even texting you about it. I was texting you about it. And I was like, good Lord, this movie's terrible.
Yeah. Tango and Cash is a movie that I wish I'd never rewatched because I saw it in the theaters as a kid. And I had great fond memories. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I thought it was funny.
And then ruined it.
Absolutely destroyed it for all time. And I bought it.
Hook.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one too. But you know what isn't tough is looking at Cobra and saying, I bet Lance Reddick could have made this at least a little bit better. And so we're here at the part in Houselights where we look at, is there a spot where we see the great late actor Lance Reddick, where he could slide in and appear in a role and bring some of that oomph that he always brought to every role, where he would make this better, where you would say, Cobra might not have been my cup of tea, but boy, that Lance Reddick, he sure made a great blank character. So Darren, to you first, where do you see Mr. Reddick?
It's so easy. He would be, easy for me. In my opinion, I would cast him as Gonzalez. He would be, he's the partner. Easy. And fortunately, he's barely in this movie. So it's a tiny little, cameo role. But, he gets to get shot in the leg and, say, I'm picturing Lance's deadpan talk about like health food. And I see it hitting better than nothing against Rennie, but I would love to see Rance in that role.
Fair. Tristan, where do you see Mr. Reddick?
I mean, I want to say Gonzalez, but at the same time, I want to say Captain Sears, played by Art LaFleur, But I kind of have a little bit of an addendum, or I should say qualification, that I would want Reddick as Captain Sears, because I feel like he would have made a great captain who just chews out the protagonist constantly, kind of like in
Last Action Hero. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly like in Last Action Hero, and exactly like in Beverly Hills Cop. Like, that's his job, is to chew out the protagonist. Like, you wrecked 20 cars. What's the deal with you? I'm going to have your badge and your gun. I feel like Reddick would have done that, but that's not really what Sears. It's such a weak role that, yeah, you know what? I'm going to take it back. I'm going to have to go with Gonzalez. Like, that's the only, like, he could really elevate that character. I think that he has something that, like, Captain Sears has nothing to give. Gonzalez at least has something to give.
Well, as much as I'd love to come in and say, you know what, throw it all away and just replace Stallone with Reddick and let's see how that works.
Wow.
I would and I completely understand and sympathize with the idea of him as Sergeant Gonzalez. I would actually like to see him as Detective Monty, Andrew Robinson's role, because I believe in Lance Reddick having the backbone to stand up to Cobretti, to be the one guy that's sitting there at the crime scene saying, why are you all applauding him? What the hell is wrong with you? Do you understand what's happening right now?
You see those 20 coroner vans that are coming down the pipe to pick up all the bodies you just killed?
Exactly.
Yeah, I picture Lance giving the no hard feelings, like just nailing that line.
I completely agree. I think that he would really work as Detective Monty. So then we come to our ratings. And I'm going to torture Darren first in the fine tradition that Tristan likes. Darren, on a scale of 1 to 5 custom-made pearl-handled Colt sidearms, how many do you give 1986's Cobra?
I looked at the rating I gave this when I first watched it a couple months back, and I gave it a 2 on Letterboxd, and I'm gonna still give it a 2. It's not a good movie. A lot of it, I hope, just ended up on the cutting room floor, or maybe it never was shot to begin with. Who knows? We'll never know, apparently. But I still give it a 2 over a 1 for it being what it is. It's so 80s. It's so 86. Like, I don't know why it's weird. Like 84 would be different, but this is like an 86 movie and it feels like an 86 movie, which is so strange to say. But it gives you what you're expecting, and nothing more. And it was really fun to talk about. And, I really enjoyed spotting Andrew Robinson that moment, which I didn't pick up the first time. I was like, oh my gosh, it's Garrick. And Brian Thompson, I think I feel sorry for Brian, because from what I've researched, he asked, what is my motivation? He asked, like, how do I play this scene, or how do I command these people or build up this? And it basically just got shut down of like, you're evil, you're bad, just deal with it. And so we've said a couple times, like, oh, if only Brian Thompson could make this better. It's like, I feel like it's, if only Brian Thompson would have been allowed to make it better, would have given the chance to be more. And it was just so apparent that it was a one-note villain, and he was kept in that box. They wouldn't let him out. And I that's the movie I want to see. I want to see the, Brian Thompson let out of his box to make that an iconic villain. And I think it could have been that against Stallone, but it wasn't to be. So 2 star, 2 swings of the axe.
Two. And Tristan, I got to ask you, on that scale, are you going to lean closer to what the LA Times said, saying that it had a pretentious emptiness and dumbness and two-faced morality? Or are you leaning more toward what Variety said at the time, which called it a sleek, extremely violent, and exciting police thriller? So I will say that's the 5 end of the scale, and LA Times was on the 1. Where in the 1 to 5 scale are you falling?
It's interesting to see, like, many studies have been done about the influence of cop culture in movies and how we view police throughout the decades. how we view police in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 10s, and today are all vastly different. They all have their own flavor. And in 86, it's very much that it's not even, if it wasn't for this corrupt system of bad cops, I'd be able to get something done. It's no, this is just red tape, just this bureaucratic bean counters just getting in the way of real street justice. And Brian Thompson gives that monologue at the end where, for the entire, like the reason why he's chasing Brigitte Nielsen is because his face was shown. Like she saw his face and recognized him, even though, damage done, there's a drawing of him, and he spends the rest of the movie not wearing a mask. And, they're no longer in the shadows, and they attack an entire town and kill an entire town, and subtlety is just out the window. It's like, we have Cobra, who's the one man who can get it done. He's like the Vic Mackey of 1986. Ugh. And it's at this time, like you see Andy Robinson's character saying, like, he's the voice of reason in this movie, but yet he's not portrayed as the voice of reason. Like in 86 would be like, man, if only we would just let cops do their jobs. And today we're like, oh my God, if only we had more Andy Robinsons. And it's just interesting. It kind of makes me, this is a total side, a tangent, but like it makes me think of It's a Wonderful Life. I know this is a tangent, but I promise I have a point where you have Potter, who is the evil banker because he's not giving a loan to Jimmy Stewart. But then fast forward to today, and you have all these movies of the predatory banks giving loans to people who can't afford them, even though those people agreed to go into those loans. Now, I'm not picking a side here. I'm just saying that it's you have these direct oppositional stances where that's kind of what makes me think of the cops, where like in the 86, it's like, oh man, the system's just getting in the way of real justice. Just let the cops do what they want to do. And then today we're just like, oh my God, like these cops need to be reined in. They just need to follow procedure. And so it's really interesting to see how that goes from decade to decade. But that's neither here nor there. I think that's one thing that was just like, it was hard to get into it because of that quote unquote mystique around it. This movie is devoid of plot, devoid of motivation. It's thin. It's a cult classic because it's terrible. Stallone could not save it with his Stallone-ness. I would love to see a 30 to 40 minute additional cut, not because I think this is a good movie, but because this is so terrible that I feel like maybe it could be saved. This is a generous 1.5 stars.
I never would have had on my bingo card, not just for the year, but ever in my life, somebody mounting a defense of Mr. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life in the course of a conversation. So
that's what you get when you're friends with me. Alternate perspectives.
That's
there
a new
are no
one
bad
for
guys,
me.
just bad perspectives.
Okay. All right.
Who thinks of the bankers? Who thinks of the bankers?
Yes, the poor bankers. We must protect them. Speaking of protecting people, I think that Cobra is an inept script that has basically something that we've seen in a lot of movies, which is this idea that the hero is trapped in a system where they overthink it and he needs to be let go because he's the useful one in the crisis sort of thing. But yes, it's just so inept that you don't sympathize with Cobra at any point. There's nothing that makes me sympathetic with Cobra. Marion Cobretti is a bumbling fool through most of this movie because I don't know what his motivation is either, outside of wearing the same clothes every day and driving a cool car that somehow is the only car to escape serious damage during a chase that, should have killed everybody. But I think that the toughest part about rating this is I have a lifelong love of it because it's so cheesy bad. Like it's one of those, it's one of the things where I think when you encounter a bad movie, if you encounter it at a certain developmental stage, you develop a fondness for it. Like it's it's almost like a friend that can't defend himself. And so you sort of stand up for him because you just, yeah, sure. I'm gonna support him as much as I can, even though I think you have a point about, whatever might be a problem with him. Like it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know how to divorce myself from that fondness. Everything in my body screams out that this should be a 1-star movie. I find so little that is quality about it at all, up to and including the soundtrack. But I'm going to give it a 2 because of that deep love that I have for it. I get why this is a cult classic, because a cult classic, even The Room, it's that opening reel that gets you into it, and then it runs out of steam. It's insufferable after that point. But if you have a crowd of people around you that are there, it's the laughter of the strong man. It's the 2-minute hate. It's the thing that gets you going because you're like, hey, I might have failed that project at work this week, but I didn't screw up that bad. And so you feel better at the end of Cobra. So because it makes me feel better about how I might have messed something up in my life, I give it a 2. So there we go. That's film number 2 of the House of Cosmatos that we have looked at. We're not off to the best start in the world, arguably. So, Darren, what are we going to look at next time in the House of Cosmatos?
Well, we're leaving the haunted LA streets and going underwater with 1989's Leviathan here on Houselights.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.